Hello, listener. So, you like scary movies? Well, it is a creepy night, and with all those crazy lunatics out there, well, you really shouldn't be alone. Ooh, you look so freaked out right now. Now I suggest you listen very carefully. Subscribe to ClassHorrorCast, or I'll gut you like a fish. Enjoy the show. I'll be watching.
Welcome to another episode of the ClassHorrorCast. I'm your host Aran, and on this week's episode I'm joined by Jacob Chase, a man who wears many hats including screenwriter, director, haunter, producer, editor and student of film. His short film Larry was picked up by Steven Speilberg's Amblin Entertainment, in which he wrote and directed, and it was released as Come Play in 2020, coming in at number 1 in the box office. Jacob also ran a successful haunted attraction, Big Worm's Sherwood Scare, which could easily rival the big time haunts. Join me as I dive inside the mind of an extremely talented individual as he offers advice on making movies, tells of his experience working with Steven Spielberg, and teases that something that he's always wanted to work on is currently in early stages. You won't want to miss a second of this incredible conversation. Can you remember your intro into horror movies or your first horror-related experience?
Yeah, I mean, the one that sticks out to me is actually a live horror experience. I grew up in LA, and my mom took me to the very first, if I remember correctly, Halloween Horror Nights. And it was back when it was just like a single maze in a parking garage. And, you know, nothing like what it is today, but I was pretty young, and hadn't been exposed that much to that sort of thing. And I was very excited to go. Got in the first room, and like a clown jumped out of a Jack-in-the-Box, and I started crying, you know, and after waiting in line for an hour or whatever, I made my mom take me out, and we left through the emergency exit after the first room. And then I sort of was bummed I didn't go through it, and I was sort of like, oh, I was so scared though. And then the next day, they were doing like a lights on walkthrough behind the scenes thing that I got to go to. And then I was like totally hooked, just seeing what went into creating these scares, how the actors worked, how the different like trap doors worked and stuff. And then from an early age, I started being obsessed with haunted houses. At first, I created and ran a haunted house for years, as an adult, and that ended in like 2014, but it was, you know, it stuck with me, that experience. So I've loved horror for a long time.
We had spoke previously there before recording about other obsessions or having other things, and it kind of, I suppose, brings this question forward a lot quicker than I was going to ask it. I would say I'm borderline obsessed with haunts, and it started in particular with Halloween Horror Nights, to the point where I would fly from Ireland every year to Orlando just for Halloween Horror Nights.
That's dedicated.
Yeah, and I had seen that you had done a haunt, and I had actually seen a lot about it, and I just want to say it, right, as a haunt guy, that I would have loved to have been able to walk through that thing. That looked... How did that all come together for you initially? Like, to go from... Like, that must have been so surreal to have your first kind of horror movie experience be, like, live in Halloween Horror Nights, and then to have your own haunt and have it so well-reviewed and so many people enjoying it. How did that all come about?
Well, thank you. First of all, I miss it tremendously. You know, I hope one day to be able to do it again. You know, anyway, how did it come about? I mean, so when I was a kid, I was obsessed with haunts, and sort of in high school, I finally convinced my best friend to put on an amateur haunt in my mom's front yard. And I used all my bar mitzvah money to buy like tarp and PVC pipe and stuff to like create this maze. And, you know, it was silly high schooler stuff, but it was like pretty impressive, I think, for a group of high schoolers to put on. And I definitely got hooked to that feeling of like a line around the block and like scaring people and, you know, building that suspense. And, you know, it's a lot of what I love about theater too. I have a big passion in musical theater, which I know seems a little antithetical, but it's that same sort of making an audience like feel something in this communal experience. So I did it in like high school, left it behind for years. And then when I like out of college in my early 20s, my friends and we used to do these charity events for this foundation called Big Worm Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, which my friend started because his brother had CF. And we used to do all sorts of things, poker tournaments, bake sales and stuff. And at some point it was like, hey, I used to do this haunted house. Like, what if we did that? And we were all sort of, didn't have enough work to fill our year. And so we're like, yeah, we have time to do that because we were, in our 20s. And it started small, but I'm just like an obsessive person. And, it became this very freaking giant thing that by the end, we were seeing like 10,000 people a year come through. Very story based. I mean, by that point, I had gone, I had done a lot of film work as well. And so we used all of our film, combined skills to like have a big storytelling element throughout the thing. And I'd also like just been to so many haunts through my life. I knew like what I liked about haunts, what I didn't. And I didn't want to just make something that was like a bunch of people popping out and scaring you anymore. Yeah. I wanted it to be really focused on suspense, a clear antagonist, things like you do in a movie. And I think that's what made it stand out. I mean, I think that was unique. And there's a few others around here. There's Delusion, Sleep No More comes to mind. But really we were one of the few doing it. And yeah, it was a great experience. I learned a ton about, suspense and building up misdirection and scaring people, that, I've taken into writing and directing.
Yeah, I definitely, I can see the storytelling aspect, and just from some of the different videos online and stuff I had seen, there's a scene where you're brought into a cabin by a guide, and just the whole that entire sequence, the story building with the TV, and you've got you've actually got things that you obviously shot with the story in mind. I think that's something that a lot of haunts don't. Don't get me wrong, I love haunts and I love people just popping out and I love looking at the different environments, but there's definitely something to be said for really being immersed in a story and really feeling like you're part of something.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it helps make the whole experience, scarier because, while like you, I love a good haunt that just like people are popping out at you and it's amazing production design. I do think when there can be a central figure that you're afraid of or some event or something you're afraid of, then the entire experience is led with this suspense in the back of your mind, that just makes the whole thing more fun.
And just kind of backtrack on something you said. So you guys started this thing out, it started pretty small. How does something, because it blows my mind that something could start out so small and then the end product look like what you guys pulled off? Because it's like, to me, just from what I've seen, obviously I didn't actually get to experience it in real life, but anything that I've seen online about that haunt, like it to me, it holds up. It looks like studio quality. It's not like and again, I don't mind them. It's not like it doesn't look like a lower budget or a smaller scale haunt. It looks like something that could be at Universal.
Yeah. Well, I mean, gosh, I don't know. I mean, the first year we did it, didn't look as good as the subsequent years. I mean, it still was pretty good. I don't know what to say. It was, I'm obsessive about it. That's frankly what it comes down to. It's like, I just didn't sleep and I would work for months on, even sometimes it was just me or my friends would help me sometimes or whatever, but I'd be like painting every nook and cranny and like doing aging on every wall and like all the stuff that no one thinks to look at, but it all adds to your overall experience. And, we're going out and filming things with our friends to add to the content. We're creating illusions like Pepper's ghosts and stuff. I don't know. I mean, it was just who I am and my long obsession with other haunts or like Disneyland and rides and things and like always learning how magic works and how just, I don't know, trying to incorporate all of it into the haunt. And I just sort of, I mean, honestly, it was detrimental to my health, I think, because I mean, I'm still this way for better or worse, that I'm just like, I go at something 100% and I sort of can't stop thinking about it until it's perfect.
Yeah. Was was all your involvement then in creating that haunt, was that all stuff that you was basically just self-taught?
Yeah,
I mean, trial by fire.
Yeah, totally. I mean, you find, random tutorials of dry brushing props and stuff, and it's like, oh, okay, I'll try using that. And so yeah, it was a mix of like finding videos of other people trying things, and also reading books about like how the haunted mansion works, and totally trial and error. Like one year we had a drop floor that would drop a few inches, which was very scary, but it like took a couple times to build the whole thing because it like just didn't hold up to the weight the first couple times. And it's like, well, that didn't work. We tried it again. And same with like air blasters and I don't know. It's because it's like a mix of engineering and then also the creative to build all this stuff. I mean, the year you mentioned with the cabin is actually sort of how the character of Larry originated from Come Play, because I had made this big stilts monster costume for that year of the haunted house, which was me on stilts with these like big sort of legs, like a Bunraku style puppet. And it was all like hand carved by me out of foam and stuff. And it had been sitting in the garage for years. And eventually when I decided to make that short film, Larry, I was like, oh, I have this monster that I made. Like, let's use that in a short film. And so, and eventually that sort of became the same silhouette we used in the feature. So it's funny how it all sort of has its roots in the haunted house. And
I guess to get into that, it's probably just natural progression. But when you made that short, how did that, was it exactly like that? You just built the story around the fact that you had this thing, or was there something in your mind and then you kind of integrated it all together?
Yeah, I mean, part of it was definitely like, hey, I have this costume. I mean, I've made countless shorts over the years, and I've learned that like spending as little money as possible is important. I think back like in film school, I used to spend way too much money on short films that like didn't warrant the budget and ultimately weren't good enough at the end of the day because I was still learning. And as I kept learning out of college and kept making shorts, even as I like had a career as a screenwriter for a while, I kept making shorts to like prove people like, hey, I can direct too, but wanted to spend as little money as possible. So, I had the monster costume and that was a big part of it. But I also, I think it was this striking image I had of a lone parking attendant with nobody around him, sort of in the middle of nowhere, that felt quite lonely and quite eerie. And so I sort of built this thematic connection between the central parking lot attendant and who the monster would be that was haunting him. So that's, I don't know, it kind of stemmed from there. And then of course it kept growing as the feature got made and stuff.
There's a lot of, I guess, conversation online I see about, aspiring filmmakers making short movies and putting them out there online and trying to get your name out there. A lot of people seem to say that, people nowadays have got access to the internet. We've basically got mini handheld supercomputers in a way. Do you think that that's all you need, or is there a certain amount of either equipment or whatever that needs to come into it?
Oh, I mean, I think you can 100% make great stuff with what you have in your pocket. I think, of course, like you can't make everything with that. So it kind of depends on what you have at your disposal. But I definitely think I'm a big believer that we should be using what we just have at our disposal. Like the fact that I had this costume I had made before, that's something not everyone had. So like, it's in my best interest to try to use that for something, because that's my unique talent or whatever, the unique thing I had. I have friends that are like really good at VFX. So like, it's in their best interest to like make a VFX driven short because like, that's a skill they have that other people don't. Maybe they're like an amazing actor and that's their skills, like put themselves in front of the camera. It's really about just using whatever you have, I do think. And of course you can get bogged down in equipment and needing special lights or whatever, but that's not, it's nice when a movie looks like a professional movie. But ultimately, if you can just like engage someone for a few minutes online with great performances or a great idea, no one is like, oh, but the lighting was bad, I don't want to work with this person. So I do think it is not only possible but important that aspiring filmmakers make as much stuff as possible.
Yeah, so you think that that's definitely a key piece of advice. Like, there's so many great shorts out there, and like you said, some of them look like super professional, some of them you can tell, have been shot on maybe an iPhone or something like that. But would you say that that's probably a key piece of advice you'd give, is just to create and keep kind of...
Yeah. I mean, that is 100% the only way that I know how this can work, is to just keep creating nonstop. The amount of shorts I made before Larry is a lot. And, the amount of movies I had written for other directors, for different studios was also a lot. And, Larry was the first one that got made as Come Play. But, that was on the back of years and years of work and trying to get stuff made.
Yeah, it's like that thing people talk about, the 10-year overnight success.
Yeah. I mean, it is true. I mean, obviously there's some luck involved for sure. Like the fact that I happened to be like going out with a short when people were like excited to make turn horror shorts into features. But yeah, I mean, the only reason I believe I got the opportunity is because I had built up a trust in, from my writing career and writing movies people seem to like, although never made. So who knows, but at least I had good relationships with studios already. And so when people were, sort of making bids on the short, it was, I think, because there was that several years behind me of at least proving I could turn in a readable script.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so the short releases, and then between that and it getting picked up and made into a feature, how long of a gap is there? Or did you kind of know that this thing start to get lots and lots of attention really quick?
Yeah, so it was fairly quick, but there was some like downtime in there. I mean, I made it before I put it online. I gave it to my agents, who shared it with everybody, and as they had with previous shorts of mine, but this one struck a nerve, and I started getting interest in like what would the feature version be, which was not something that I had like planned. I didn't have an idea for the feature, and I wouldn't have been so bold to assume anyone would care what a feature version of that was. And I was in pre-production on a TV show that I had created at ABC at the time. And all these meetings were like coming in, and I just like didn't have time. And so there was like a good month where I kind of just kept putting these meetings off because I was in prep. And then a few weeks before we were shooting that show, it fell apart, which was devastating at the time because it was like my baby. And I was at home commiserating, and my wife was like, look, everyone's interested in that Larry short. Like, why don't you figure out what that feature would be? And so that Friday I did. I mean, I'd been percolating ideas for it for a while, but I finally like figured out what the pitch was, took it out the next week. And by the following Friday, I had sold it, in this competitive situation, which was awesome. And really like helped me kind of get over the heartbreak of my show falling apart at the last minute. And then, it did move really quickly, surprisingly quickly. And I have, having had numerous films get very close and fall apart, I didn't believe it every step of the way. I was like, oh, it's going to fall apart any second. But it didn't. I mean, I was, I don't know, very fortunate. The first draft I turned in, Steven Spielberg read and really liked. And, we started casting right off of that as I was revising the script. And, between the time we sold it and shot it was less than a year, which is, crazy, but it's insanely fast.
Yeah, that statement alone that you just made there, you kind of made it as just like an everyday thing, but I think for most people listening to this, Steven Spielberg read it and loved it. Like that's an absolutely that's got to be surreal.
Yeah, no, I mean, I joke that it's like I don't know how I go up from here. Like, I got to work with the man himself. I mean, my idol and the guy whose career I admire more than anybody's. Yeah, I mean, it's a big reason I went with Amblin, of all the studios that were interested in it. I mean, the idea of getting any kind of working time with him was really alluring. And I did. I mean, it was amazing to get any experience with him at all. And he got involved in the script stage. And then, when we were shooting, he wasn't on set, but I would hear, from him like, oh, he really liked that scene or that shot. And I'm like, oh, I can't think about the fact that he's watching my dailies. Like that's nerve wracking. And then in post, he got involved and would come in the edit and I'd get to work with him a little bit, which was so freaking crazy and so much fun. I learned a ton from him and just how his mind works and he always had great ideas and stuff. So really, yeah, amazing. I don't know how I top that.
Yeah, I was just going to ask there. It just seems, I guess most people, including myself, won't be able to understand that feeling. Like I'm sure everybody out there has maybe he's not necessarily your only, idol or someone who's inspired you or whatever, but how do you like keep yourself together when, like, cause that to me feels like, okay, it's obviously the goal and the dream is for something like this to happen, but then also maybe the reality hits, whether it be first day of shooting or the first day you get to meet him, and it's like, holy shit, I've got to like, I've really got to make this. This needs to work.
I mean, I'm a person that's full of anxiety constantly, so I'm sort of always anxious regardless. But I sort of tend to put that anxiety into the work, and just like it makes me, I think, focus on planning and trying to be as ready as possible. I don't know. I mean, I was incredibly nervous, leading up to the first day of shooting. And then I very quickly realized, like, once I got on set, like past all the trailers and trucks and the hundreds of people, like once it was just me and the actors and the DP, like it was exactly the same as anything else I'd ever shot. And it was kind of this aha moment for me of like, oh, there's nothing crazy here. We're just all trying to make something, and it's the exact same thing I did making the short or all the shorts before that or whatever else I've done. I made a small indie movie 10 years ago or 11 years ago now that was, very small. That was super small crew and stuff, but it was exactly the same ultimately as shooting this slightly bigger budget movie.
Yeah. And I guess so, this starts as a short, things move really quick into a feature. When you decided to go with Amblin and different things like that, was there something in particular that, whoever you spoke to or whoever was really going after this, was there something in particular on why they were so sure of this? Like they wanted this or do you feel like that there's something in particular that maybe your work had over, I'm sure there's thousands, hundreds of thousands of people trying to do the same thing, but the fact that, you worked with Steven Spielberg and it's like,
I mean, I don't know. I think, people liked the short, but I think specifically in the feature pitch I had was the idea of this central character of Oliver, who was a nonverbal kid on the spectrum which is something I had a lot of personal experience with. My wife works with kids with autism. And so I'd had a lot of relationships with kids and their families and sort of gotten to know that community and felt it was a community underrepresented in especially mainstream movies. So I do think there was an interest in this unique perspective on a horror film, that it was told through the eyes of this kid who was a kid we hadn't seen in a horror movie before. And so I think that stuck with people. And I think people really were interested in that and exploring that. And that was a big part of it. I mean, there was other things too, you know, my love of practical effects and the fact that I did it practically in the short and wanted to do it practically in the feature, I think got people excited and, you know, other things too. But I do know that like what I, you know, whenever I pitch stuff, I tend to come from a character perspective. And I definitely felt with that one that was something that people, you know, definitely responded to.
Yeah. Yeah. So you go and shoot this movie, you know, it's coming up to time of release then. Did those nerves kick back in again or how? And especially with the world we've all been living in, I guess your anxiety got to be like in overdrive.
Yeah, I mean, it was, you know, not as simple as that because we were supposed to come out and then COVID hit. And so it got pushed several times. And that, yeah, it was a frustrating experience. I mean, obviously COVID has been terrible for a ton of reasons. And most importantly, because of all the death that's happened and people that have been hurt. But in my little world, like, you know, I had this movie that I was proud of and, you know, it was like my first studio movie and it was, you know, important to sort of get out there. And then there was this ongoing conversation of like, do we release it during the pandemic or not? Ultimately, you know, I don't have final say, but I was part of the conversations and, you know, and they had made this decision to release it on Halloween, which was at a time in the pandemic where it was not at the peak and people were starting to slowly go to the movies a little bit. And we were going to be kind of like the only real new horror film being released that week. And so they saw an opportunity and they took it. And it was, you know, I think with that being the decision, I think we did as well as we could do, you know, at the time. And yes, of course, anxiety, like I said, I'm an anxious person always. But you know, it was unfortunate that it came out in a time where most people were still afraid to go to the movies, understandably. You know, I went and saw it a couple times with a relatively big crowd, which was fun. And, you know, luckily before COVID, we had test screened the movie and stuff. So I had gotten to see sort of it with a big crowd before. But yeah, obviously not exactly the way we wanted it to come out. So I'm, you know, I'm hopeful over time people will find it more than they did when it first came out.
Yeah, and this is a conversation I've had many times with many people. I think it's the good side of the power of, I guess, the internet and social media. Particularly things like, I'm not a huge TikTok guy or anything, but the amount of movies that I've seen like rediscovered, or whatever you want to say, from somebody, you know, popular posting on TikTok or a clip from a movie. And I feel like, I don't know if it's the same for you right now, you know, in the States and stuff, but over here I've noticed the movie seems to be having a resurgence again. You know, Ireland, the UK, a lot of people seem to be posting different clips, especially now it's coming up to Halloween and stuff. I've seen a lot of people mention that it's up for rent and purchase on YouTube over here now. And I love that can be a thing, that it doesn't just have to disappear and then we can never rediscover it, I guess. And then I think I guess things like Netflix and the amount of times, maybe it's just because we're behind the times in Ireland and the UK and Europe and stuff, but when a movie comes onto Netflix for the first time or whatever, these things like shoot to number one and get like millions and millions and millions of views, which I think is great, really.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I think that's the world we live in now. And certainly I'm one of those people too, that like when a new movie pops up on, you know, Netflix or Hulu or whatever, I watch it. So yeah, I hope it keeps finding a life. You know, it's, and obviously as filmmakers, you know, I think we all dream of that big theatrical experience. And it was like this double-edged sword where like we were in 2,000 theaters, but not as many people were going. So it was, yeah, I don't know. I got like half of the dream. And so I'm hoping that, you know, I get to make another movie soon and it'll come out not during the pandemic.
I get that. Is there? I guess you probably can. This question always gets the same answer in a way. It's like, well, I can't really talk about this or that. But is there anything in the works? Is there anything getting closer to maybe us getting to see you again?
Yeah. Oh, definitely. I mean, I directed a TV show that comes out next week on Peacock, which I don't know if you guys have that out there, but The Girl in the Woods that I directed for the episodes that I was super fun, and it's got a lot of horror in it. This really fun relationship drama at the center. And then on the feature side, I've got a couple movies that I wrote and will direct that, you never know if these things go, but there's a couple that look very close. So fingers crossed. We're pushing the boulder up the hill, and we shall see. Definitely making this TV show sort of took me out of the movie world for a few months this year. But now I'm back into getting those movies made.
That comes out, is it a week today? The 21st of October, I think, Thursday the 21st?
It is the 21st, yeah. As I understand it, all 8 episodes will be up first day, so people can binge it.
That was done through that was done through Crib TV. No, yeah.
Crib TV is the production company, and then Peacock is the network.
How was the experience? I guess so. You've done so much, really. I mean, you've done Haunts, you've done short movie, you've turned your short into a feature. Now you've done a TV show. How did that differ from everything else you'd done in the past?
I mean, in some ways, not much at all. It's still making stuff and whatever. But I mean, I think what was different for me was it was definitely a faster schedule in TV, which was challenging, but I think we made it work. And then what was fun about it was like, I didn't write it. It was this wonderful writer, Jane Casey, and she, I think I just fell in love with her writing and her voice. And so it was really fun to like be exploring someone else's words on the day. And I really liked that experience, and on the feature side, there's a lot of stuff that I've written myself to direct, but there's a couple things that other writers are writing for me. And, this experience got me more excited for those opportunities, to be like collaborating with someone on the script and really having another brain in the room, basically.
Do you think we could ever see the potential to have Come Play become a haunted attraction, or maybe Universal or somewhere like that? Is that something you'd like to do?
Well, the sad news is that before COVID, that was in the works to do a Horror Nights tie-in, since it was Universal. So very depressed that didn't come to fruition with COVID and Halloween Horror Nights being canceled. And, frankly, the reality is I don't think the movie made a big enough impact for it to become a horror maze at this point, unless we get lucky enough to make a sequel, and then maybe, who knows. But at the moment, I don't think so. But hopefully the next stuff I do can be made into haunted houses. That is my ultimate goal, is to just get haunted houses at Horror Nights based on products that I create. That's what I really want.
Yeah. Would you want to be involved in the whole process? I know some filmmakers, companies, whatever. I'm not sure exactly how it works, but would you like to be more hands-on than just being like, oh yeah, it's my movie, is a haunt now?
Yeah, I probably would want to be way more hands-on than anyone would want me to be. So I would, as with most things in making film and stuff, I would be pushing to be a part of every little minute part of the process until I get kicked out.
Yeah, I could see that. What's the scariest haunt you've ever done? Or can you remember? Do you remember anything that was truly terrifying?
Haunt.
Or even a favorite haunt?
Nothing has ever... I have some favorite haunts. I mean, nothing has ever matched the level of fear I had as a kid going to haunts, unfortunately, because you get sort of just used to it and numb. I absolutely love Delusion. which is an LA-based haunt, very story-focused. It's a premium priced experience, but very worth it in my opinion. There are a couple home haunts I love, like this one Rotten Apple in Los Angeles that's incredibly detailed. There's one in Florida that doesn't happen anymore, but I loved, called the Radley Haunt. I haven't been to a lot of ones that like really get under my skin, unfortunately. There's some that have like, I think the stuff that's like really gross, like I've been in haunts that like shove live cockroaches down your shirt, or like, you know, people sneeze on you and you walk on condoms, things like that. That stuff tends to just make me feel like, ugh, like, why am I doing this? And less like actually fearful. But I love them all. I mean, every year, you know, we go to every haunt we can find.
I love that. That's one thing I would absolutely love to live in the States, because we have that. It's starting to get here now, but it's on a much smaller scale. Like I would say in the entire country of Ireland, we probably have maybe less than 20 haunts in the entire country.
Wow. Well, you got to make one yourself. I mean, you have all the like costumes and masks already behind you.
Yeah, this is something that's potentially in the works, actually, funny enough.
All right, good.
What's your opinion on things like extreme haunts? I know you just mentioned there are things like, you know, experiences that do the cockroaches and different things. I'm sure you've probably heard of McCamey Manor and stuff like that. What's your opinion on that? Is it just shock value for the sake of shock value?
I mean, I think luckily Russ McCamey had the only haunt that was that extreme and that sort of dangerous. I mean, I think that's psychopathic and not a haunt, is my opinion, and shouldn't exist in the world of well-meaning, well-intentioned haunts. That's I mean, it's the equivalent of like putting a snuff film out and saying it's a horror movie, to me. But, you know, I think there are lots of other haunts that try to simulate that experience. And while maybe there aren't for me, I can understand why they would be for some people. You know, there was like Blackout and stuff, which like wasn't my favorite thing in the world, but like people love that and love the extreme stuff. And I like when things like push the limits a little bit, for sure. But, you know, specifically McCamey is not something I am a fan of.
Yeah, it's one of those things that I think everybody, when they hear about it, they're just intrigued by the like, wait a sec, what? And then they kind of look, and I think maybe he's played up on that then as well. I mean, I didn't realize a while ago I took a deep dive on the whole Russ McCamey thing, and I told this story a couple of times before. I potentially got that deep. I'm not sure how this happened, but I got an email at like 4 a.m. Irish time with a phone number, a US phone number. It just said, call me. And I'm like, I fall back asleep, whatever. I get up for work and I look back. I thought it was a dream at first. I was like, did I get an email last night? And I look back through and it's Russ. So apparently, because I had been kind of digging about like what he does, and then apparently he moved to Alabama and he has all these weird things that go on. He wanted to like talk to me or whatever, and I was like, is this part of the? Now I want to talk to him, because is this part of just like does he like when people do this, because it just kind of creates a thing and he just can sit back?
Yes, I can tell you, having met him a number of times and been in a documentary that he is also featured in heavily. Yes, I think the publicity is what he enjoys. And, look, good for him. I mean, I hope at the end of the day, he's a good man and not as dangerous as he seems. But to the outside, I think it's a pretty dangerous thing to put out there and to be creating.
Without getting, I guess, too personal or too making this conversation too weird. When you had met him, does he just seem like a normal guy?
I mean, he seems like exactly who he is in like any interview that you've seen of him, and definitely loves what he does, for better or worse. So that's what I will say.
Yeah, I could see that. Favorite horror movies? Do you have anything that's... I don't like asking like what's your number one movie because it's so hard for people, but do you have any, what would I call them, comfort horror maybe? Like, for example, I'm a huge Michael Myers and a huge Halloween guy, and I would consider myself in a way... I would consider myself a Halloween purist, but I also love Halloween Resurrection, as terrible as that is, and lots of people shit on it. And I would consider it a comfort movie. I like just watching it. I like Halloween H2O. I get it. Lots of people don't. Do you have, a handful of go-to movies that you watch time and time again?
Yeah, I mean, horror movies do still affect me. Like it's hard to like get super scared in a horror movie anymore, but they do still make me feel on edge. Like I would... The Ring is one of my favorite horror movies ever, but I would never call it a comfort movie because I like can't watch it for comfort because it's so unnerving, but like it legitimately gets under my skin. And with like however much I appreciated Hereditary, like I would never watch that just for like to have on in the background because it's like so unnerving. I tend to feel, more comfort movies. Like I think the first two Conjuring movies, really do that for me. Like I just love that world and those characters, and the scares are so expertly created. I like the third one as well. There's older movies like The Fly that I just love. I'm talking about the original Fly, but also the remake. I really appreciate. And then, like Jaws probably is my number one that I would say is like a comfort movie that I could watch all the time, every day. And is just a perfect film, and I would consider it a horror movie. A ton. I love movies. So it's sort of, it's rare to find a movie, like a horror movie that I'm just like, oh, that's terrible. Like I tend to just like appreciate them for something.
Yeah, me too.
They don't totally work.
Yeah, me too. It's funny you mentioned Jaws, and that I would consider that one of mine as well. And I'm sure there's millions of other people. But I had a chat with I don't know if you know who Keith Coogan is, Jackie Coogan's grandson.
No.
He was in Adventures of Babysitting, Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead, a couple of different movies. And I had asked him if he could only watch one movie for the rest of his life. And he said Jaws. Straight away, no hesitation. He was like, Jaws, that's it. I don't care if it's people don't consider it straight horror. He was like, Jaws, easy.
I understand that answer. It is a great film. Anytime it's playing, like a film print is playing, I try to go see it. It's incredible.
Did you, I know it was probably impossible to, and you probably wouldn't anyway, but, when you get to sit in a room with Steven Spielberg, did you get to fanboy out a bit, or did you just have to try and, no, we're here for work, business, let's not go there?
I didn't much, but we did. I mean, I did ask lots of questions of just like favorite moments. Like we talked about Poltergeist quite a bit. That was a big one we discussed because huge fan of Poltergeist. That would be another one of my like probably comfort horror movies. And we talked about specific shots. The table and the chairs shot and stuff, and he gave a ton of detail about that. And I didn't do a ton of fanboying. I'm sure he gets that all the time, but I, of course, did tell him how impactful his career was to me. And especially he was part of this computer game back in the day called Steven Spielberg's Director's Chair. That came out in, I don't know, the 90s or early 2000s maybe. And I had gotten it as a kid on my old like PC computer, and it was like you got to like quote unquote film scenes, but it was, pre-recorded scenes. Like Quentin Tarantino was one of the actors in it. And then you could like edit it together, and then you'd like put it out and in the game, and you'd like have a box office, whatever, how good you did or not. It was awesome. And it was so silly, but I did tell him how much that impacted me.
I don't know if I'm remembering this correctly or not. Does that have Quentin Tarantino in Inmates?
Yes.
Yeah,
it does.
I think I remember that vaguely.
Yeah, he goes to prison, and then you could like rewrite the script, and there was clearly like different versions of the scene they shot, so like you could have different sort of line readings and stuff, and it was pretty innovative at the time, and I got a huge joy out of it. So yeah, anyway, I was happy I got to tell him about that.
It's crazy. And I had this conversation recently with somebody just about nostalgia and the whole magic of movies, I guess. It's crazy how much nostalgia there is behind Steven Spielberg related movies, everything. I like I said before, I travel to Orlando a lot to do Universal, and I find myself the ride that I always go to is E.T. And even though it's like so dated, and that's part of the, like, I don't ever want them to update that. Don't get rid of it. Don't do anything. Just leave it exactly like it is. Do you think that there's something maybe we've lost from, like, say 70s, 80s, 90s to modern day film? It feels like, me personally, I feel like since the decline of physical media, video stores, and maybe even, and I really hope that the whole pandemic hasn't really put another nail in the coffin, but the whole movie going experience, it doesn't feel as magical. Would you say that that's it? Like, is there something there that we've just lost because everything is streaming? Everything is like, I can have it right now. I need it this second. It's done.
I mean, I think it's different, but I also think like everyone loves the era they grew up in,
true.
Who are we to like judge the way kids these days consume media? And, I don't think, my little cousins are obsessed with The Office, and they watch it over and over and over. And, to them, that's nostalgia now, like when they grow up, they're going to remember The Office. And even though it's like to them an oldie already, which is insane. But, I think people will feel the same way about, like, I don't know, Stranger Things or Manhunter or, gosh, I don't know. I mean, there's plenty of like amazing stuff. And I think we tend to forget about all the bad movies that came out in those times as well. Like, yes, there's a lot more movies period now, but at the times, like, it's not like we remember every movie fondly. We remember the great movies, So I hope that the good stuff will still rise to the top, and the things that we saw as kids, whenever we were kids, will still like be seared in our brains and have that nostalgia for us.
Yeah, that's because I always feel like that's like, maybe it's just my bias for like what I personally experienced and things that, and then I have conversations and I'm like trying to convince people. I'm like, yeah, no, it's just, there's something lost there. And I'm like, yeah, maybe it's just me. I'm just like obsessing over, I guess, the experience of, going to the video store and having to curate your own weekend or whatever. And those things of like, when it's on, it's on. You've got to watch it when it's on or you miss it. Right. And, trying to explain to somebody younger now that, we had a book you could buy in the store that would tell you what was going to be on TV.
Right.
And the time. And then you would have to be there.
But is that really better? Like,
that's true. That's true.
Now it's a lot easier. It's probably a better thing for our productivity and getting to watch more, that we don't have to drive to a store to like pick out videotapes. As much as I love doing that, and I did it constantly, and I like would ask for recommendations from my video store clerk, and and that's how I found movies. Like, of course I miss that too, but this I think is definitely easier. And I also think, like, look, the truth is more people are getting to make more stuff. Like there was a real barrier to entry in the 70s and 80s and 90s and 2000s. Like, movies cost a lot of money. A few people get to make movies every year, and that's it. And at that time, no one was doing TV that was like, it wasn't a respectable medium or whatever. And now there's so many movies getting made. And yes, you risk the chance that it'll get buried on Netflix or something and no one will see it, but you're getting to make your stuff. So I think overall things are better for filmmakers now. Of course, I hope the theatrical experience remains. I just saw Dune the other day on IMAX and was blown away. And I was like, this is what movies are for. And I have to believe that kind of filmmaking will have to remain in theaters. But in the meantime, lots more people get to make TV and movies.
Do you think that, I guess, the speed that everything moves now with streaming and all these different platforms, does it make people less invested? I guess is kind of where I was going, maybe more so. Like, is there more grounds for people to, like, obviously if you went to the video store, like you said, and you're speaking to a person and you get recommendations, you have a conversation, you kind of build this rapport with somebody and you chat about it, I didn't really like it or whatever. Do you think the fact that we can just click onto Netflix, look at 5 minutes of a movie and go, no, terrible, I'm just gonna, because it's technically free or whatever,
Well, would you rather keep watching a movie you don't enjoy?
This is true.
I don't know. I mean, yeah, like I agree with you that I miss that, but I also feel like the great stuff still does break out and still becomes a big conversation. I mean, everyone was watching Ted Lasso week to week. Everyone was watching Game of Thrones. Everyone, watches Stranger Things the day it comes out. I mean, it's, there are, the quality stuff, I still believe, does, for the most part, rise to the top. And the quality stuff that doesn't, I think, finds an audience over time. So I think, by and large, it is better that someone can click on your work rather than having to, have some random video store clerk recommend it at the store. And what if you don't get on the front, new releases wall of Blockbuster? Like, on Netflix, you can still find the thing. So I don't know. I understand what you're saying, and I do miss it, but I do think it's probably for the best.
For the best, yeah, I would probably agree. I just like to play devil's advocate. Is there a movie or a franchise, an existing IP, a character, anything like that within the horror world that you would love to either, I don't know, reboot, write a script for, direct, whatever, Freddy, Jason, whatever. It doesn't even have to be some of the bigger ones, but is there something existing that you would love a chance to work on?
Yes, there's one that I am working on that I can't talk about. So the answer is yes. I will say one that is maybe not currently thought of as a horror property, but I have this dream of making a Penguin horror film, like Penguin from the DC comics, like a really grounded, gritty, like Penguin as a kid style horror film. That's kind of an IP that I've been, thinking about a lot. But there's lots of stuff that I'd be interested in taking a crack at. Some more realistic than others, but there's one that I am currently working on.
There's a cliffhanger for everybody now. They can go online and try and figure out what it is.
There's nothing online about it, and who knows? It could never get made, of course, like a lot of these things. But it's been fun to work on as of now.
Well, let's hope that that's not the case. You had mentioned obviously Penguin there and that kind of stuff. Do you think that there's obviously we spoke about Halloween Kills earlier. Is there something to the fact that obviously we've talked a lot about nostalgia, well, more so me, and trying to kind of pitch the 90s and the 80s and stuff again? What do you think it is that brings studios, whoever, back to, this week alone? Like, we've got Michael Myers, the new Chucky, TV series, all these things seem to be.
We got the Scream trailer.
Yeah,
I know you did last summer is coming out.
Yeah, like is there something to like? What would you say the reasoning behind all those throwbacks, reboots, remakes?
I mean, I think one, they're all things that people loved and are excited to revisit. So, look, the truth of it is that when you're putting millions of dollars into something, you want the greatest guarantee that people are going to see it. Mm-hmm. And all those things you just mentioned, you were going to be there opening day to see. If it's a new horror movie, if it's Antlers, like it's going to be harder to convince an audience that this is the one you should like spend your hard-earned money on to go see. You should pay $50 for a babysitter and then pay $20 a ticket to go see this and pay for food. And, it's going to see a movie as $100 experience for a lot of people. So, I think that's a big reason. And then also like all of the executives, at studios now, we all grew up with these movies. And so it's like, we all have a great love for them. And I think that's one of the reasons why the reboots of today, I think, are treated a lot more respectfully and like a lot more, like they're not as cynical as I think they had been in the past. Mm-hmm. Like I thought the Candyman reboot was like fascinating and awesome. And obviously the new Halloween, I haven't seen the Halloween Kills, but the new Halloween before that I thought was a wonderful film. And they pay such homage to the original, but are still something new. So I think it's just that we're all of an age now that like, those are the things we grew up with. So it's the things we want to work on and get made. And, and people have been trying forever. I mean, I was, asked to pitch on, I know what you did last summer years ago on like a new movie version. And then obviously someone came up with a great TV show version. They did that. So it's like, this stuff floats around for a while and there's just enough of us that love these original properties that we're like, well, if someone's going to do it, it should be us. And we try to come up with a new take on it.
Is there a property out there that hasn't been redone yet that you as a fan would like to see? Like I would love to see, I don't know. Just when you mentioned, I know what you did last summer. I think of things like Urban Legend and different things like that. Is there anything that pops into your mind as a fan that you would just love to see? Kind of.
Urban Legend is a fun one. Gosh, that's hard. Things as a fan that I would like to see rebooted. I can't think of anything off the top of my head because it's tough because it's like your favorite things. You kind of like, I don't want to touch them.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's explorations within worlds that are fun ideas to think about, like what is the, I would never want to remake E.T., but like, is there a movie about, Keys, the antagonist from E.T. that's interesting and like where they came from and that sort of like buttons up against the beginning of E.T. or something or the end. I would never want a remake of Close Encounters, but like, is there something interesting about like what happens to the family when Richard Dreyfuss leaves and it's like about what happened to them? I don't know. I'm just spitballing now, but like I get the kind of things that I get interested in.
Yeah, I get that. Okay, so a couple of final questions. Are you a collector of anything currently? Like, do you collect movies, vinyls, music, anything?
I have a weird little thing I collect. I have always loved hippos, the animal, as a kid, and it started when I was a child, and ever since whenever I see a hippo, I tend to get it. So I have a giant collection of just like hippo figurines and stuffed animals and stuff that sort of stuck with me from a kid. I have other things, like I'm a huge musical theater fan, so I've got like binders and binders of playbills from everything I've seen. That kind of thing.
I love hearing stuff like that because I think a lot of people probably would have expected you to say like, I've got body parts and I've got this and I've got monsters and I've got whatever. I just love when because I think collectors of anything kind of get each other, you know, whether it be of movies or books or whatever it might be. And I love when people have those like stories of like, well, I collect this kind of thing. Like I have a massive collection of Beanie Babies. And it's just, it's one of those things that like now when you say that, like a lot of people, younger people are like, what? And then anybody else is like, you still collect those? And I'm like, I don't know why. It started a long time ago, and I don't know why.
One day they'll be worth something. That's what they tell us.
Yeah. Okay, so second last thing. Where can people find you, support you, and is there anything that you can say about the future? Obviously, we spoke about the TV show next week. Is there anything else that you can, or you're currently working on, that you can talk about?
Well, I mean, I'm pretty easily findable on like Instagram and Twitter and stuff. I'm not a big like user of those, but I'm there sometimes. Is there anything I can talk about? I mean, not the TV show, Girl in the Woods comes out next week. I've, a couple movies that I'm really excited about, but it's, I don't want to jinx them by revealing them to the public.
Yeah, of course.
But, a couple of them are close, and I hope to be making them this year. So fingers crossed.
Well, all the links for your stuff will be in the description wherever anyone is listening to the podcast. And you can check out your website as well, which is Jacob. Is it Jacob _ Chase?
It's Jacob-Chase.com.
Yeah, and all the social medias are there, but they'll all be down below in the description. So final question before I let you go is, why horror and what does it mean to you?
Well, I think, it took me a long time to combine my love of horror with my love of filmmaking. A lot of the stuff I wrote for years was dramas or big action adventure movies, which I still have a love of course. But horror became, I realized how much I loved The Haunt and how much I loved standing at the back of the haunted house and having people leave, having had a communal experience of being scared, of laughing, of joy, of like, it's a genre that makes people hold each other tight. And I think it's a genre that lets you explore humanity in a very real, visceral way that could, in another genre, feel melodramatic or like like a lesson at school or something. Like, that's not what you want, right? Like, I think, come play, I was able to feature a character with autism, in a very realistic, grounded way that I think, if it wasn't a horror movie, wouldn't have been seen, frankly. And I love that horror can do that we can say things about the world wrapped in this scary sort of present. And those are my favorite horror movies, the ones that really have something to say, that are being a mirror to our current culture or emotions or something. And it gets everyone in the theater to see it together and to hold each other tight. That's what I like.
Yeah, I like that. I could probably agree with all that. I love just hearing so many different people's answers, because I think horror means something different to everybody, or whatever it is. Film can mean so many different things to so many different people. Like I said before, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you. I hope that we can do it again, maybe when things get closer to greenlit or whatever, or you've got some announcements, we can do it again maybe next year. I wish you all the best, all the health and happiness, and thanks for coming on. Thank you so much.
It's been a total pleasure talking to you. Thank you for inviting me on.
Of course, man. Thanks.
Evil wears many masks, but pure horror wears only one. Support First Class Horror on Patreon for as little as $1. Can't get enough of the horror? Carve yourself a deal from official merchandise, only on Teespring. Join us on all social media at First Class Horror. We have such sights to show you.